This is the brand new iPhone 16 Pro that Apple promises to be a content creator's dream. And this is the iPhone 5S that was released back in 2013. That back then when this was released only cost $699, and this tiny little camera, this was revolutionary back then. In this video we're going to compare the cameras of these two smartphones. We're here in the beautiful city of Vienna. We have some real world example for you guys. So grab a cup of coffee and let's get going. What's up everybody, welcome back to the channel. In case you're new here, welcome. My name is Julian, I'm the creator of Smartphone Filmmaking Pro, and on this channel we talk about making better videos using our smartphones, turning that into a business. So in case that's interesting for you, make sure you hit that subscribe button. So before we're gonna get into the real world comparisons, let's actually compare what you get with an iPhone 16 Pro that is costing 1,349 euros. And back then, as I mentioned before, this was 649 euros. So as you can see at the back, you have three cameras on the 16 Pro and you only have one camera on the 5S. With the 16 Pro, you have an ultra wide angle lens that now also has a 48 megapixel sensor. You have a 1x lens that also has a 48 megapixel sensor, and now you also have a new 5x telephoto lens. With the iPhone 5S back then, as I mentioned, you only have one lens. And back then this was an 8 megapixel sensor, which even for the standards of 2013 has been pretty bad, to be honest. There have been other smartphones that had a way higher megapixel count. But actually, what does all of that mean and how good are the results that you can get with them? With that 8 megapixel sensor that you had on the 5S, you were able to capture photos, obviously. You had no option to shoot any kind of raw photos or anything like this, and you could capture 1080p videos at up to 30 frames per second. And new with the 5S back then was that you also could record in slow motion 120 frames per second, but then the quality dropped down to 720p. Something that is also pretty funny with the 5S back then, the front camera is a 1-point-something megapixel sensor that we're gonna find out how good or how bad it actually looked back then. And if we go back to the 16 Pro, obviously you now can shoot in 4K at up to 120 frames per second. You have ProRes log, you have Dolby Vision HDR. There are basically no limits. You have spatial audio that we're also gonna test out in this video. So yeah, when it comes to the sheer features, obviously there is absolutely no comparison, but let's now find out how it actually translates into real world examples. We're gonna spend the day in Vienna, we're gonna walk around, we're gonna test out everything there is to test to find out how far we've actually come. So let's follow me and let's get started. So first up, let's check out some daylight photos. And this is quite interesting because like when I was shooting with the iPhone, it looked like, you know, the 16 Pro looks like 10 times better than the iPhone 5S. And now just looking at the pictures, like just from side by side, like obviously the, you know, the field of view that you get with the 16 Pro is wider. But generally speaking, just looking at this, like there is obviously a difference, but this is not like a crazy difference. Like when I've been shooting, I expected this to be like a lot bigger difference. Like you can see the color shift is a little off, like this looks a bit more natural. This leans towards the magenta tone. It's not rendering the shadows as well. But generally speaking, overall, like for an 11-year-old phone, like this is freaking amazing. Let's move over to the next shot. And there is basically the same thing. Like when it comes to the iPhone 16 Pro photo, basically, like to be honest, in my personal liking, I even think like this is too bright, and I in some way I even prefer the iPhone 11, the iPhone 5S picture, excuse me. Obviously, like with the iPhone 16 Pro, you can shoot in RAW and so on. So obviously you can tweak that image just a lot more. But generally speaking, like looking back at all of the pictures, like it is crazy the difference. I think with this picture right here, you could notice the biggest advancement compared to what we had before. I think the dynamic range and overall just the skin tone and how natural it looks like, I feel like this is where the new iPhone really shine. And probably if we would compare that to something like the iPhone, I don't know, 12 or so, that would also look somewhat like this. But I think there you can see the biggest difference. But in conclusion, when it comes to taking day-to-day pictures in good sunlight, in good lighting as we had it in Vienna, like I think the iPhone 5S holds up surprisingly well. Obviously the 16 Pro is better, like no questions, but I'm still very surprised in how good the 5S actually, held up to the brand new iPhone. When it comes to the slow motion shot, this is also a very interesting one, because this is where I was expecting like the biggest difference, because the brand new iPhone 16 Pro can shoot in 4K at 120 frames per second, and the iPhone 5S only could shoot in 720p. And if we're looking back at the video, like obviously this is crispy smooth and it looks fantastic, but when we're looking back at the iPhone 5S video, like it holds up extremely well, considering this is an 11-year-old smartphone and this is high frame rate. Like this video right here, this is just 720p, and I upscaled that to 4K so that you guys can see it in full screen. But this is actually what it would look like if I did not scale it to the frame size. So this is the original size, and everything else is just upscaled. So obviously you can also see that the focus is jittering around a little bit and the colors are breaking. But again, like just looking at the video, and if you're seeing a clip like this on social media, you would probably not say like, man, this looks absolutely horrible. What you can hear right now is coming from the iPhone 16 Pro, and the new 16 Pro has a few party tricks, as it has spatial audio. It has 4 microphones right now, and now we're gonna switch over to the iPhone 5S. The image does look kind of horrible, to be honest, because of the extreme contrast that we have, and the 5S just cannot handle that. All right, so with the audio test right here, this is also a very interesting one. As of recording of this video, I'm editing this video inside of Premiere Pro. The spatial audio option is nice on the iPhone, and you can change, between cinematic and focus mode and all that stuff, but it is not available in Premiere Pro, for example. So I basically only get the regular spatial audio, and everything that you have seen just has been done on the iPhone. I exported that and so on. So the workflow as of right now is a little, it's not too good, to be honest. And if we're just listening back at the audio itself, like I have again been very surprised with the iPhone 5S, because if we're just listening like directly to the iPhone 5S and to the spatial audio sound, like the iPhone 5S even feels more focused onto my voice compared to the brand new iPhone 16 Pro. So that has been very interesting. And if we're taking a closer look at the colors, like this is obviously in the video mode. This is where you can see in tricky lighting situations where the evolvement has been over the last 11 years. So if we compare these two shots, like this is a night and day difference, to be honest. And generally speaking, like when it comes to the iPhone 5S, like this kind of like has this, I don't know, Super 8mm VHS camera style feeling and vibe to it. Obviously it's not better, and I don't prefer that, but it just has this vintage vibe that I kind of resonate with. With the video stabilization, this is also where you can see a massive difference. If we're taking a closer look at these two shots here again, like it's just holding them side by side, like you can see here on the iPhone, like this is crazy smooth on the 16 Pro, and the 5S, like I was expecting that it does not has any kind of stabilization at all, and it seems like there is some kind of stabilization going on, but obviously it's like no comparison compared to the 16 Pro. Like this looks like this is shot on a gimbal, and this is a quite bumpy road, I would say. And then there is one more thing that you can obviously do with the 16 Pro, and with every iPhone, starting with the iPhone 11 Pro, and that is that you can always switch over to the ultra wide angle lens, and then obviously it's even way smoother. So I think when it comes to the video stabilization, there has been a very great leap forward. All right, so what we're testing right now, this is the front-facing camera of the iPhone 16 Pro versus the front-facing camera of the iPhone 5S. Just looking at the screen, it is very clear that the iPhone 5S colors just look very washed out. The front camera test has also been very funny, because like as I have been taking the pictures and I have been looking back at the footage, On the iPhone 5S, the screen has just been so dark and it just looked like absolutely atrocious. And now looking back, in this tricky lighting situations, you can just see that the lens flares and all that stuff is like really crazy compared to the brand new iPhone 16 Pro. Like if you are in better lighting situations and in easier lighting situations, I don't think that the difference is that big. Like if we take a closer look at this shot right here, again, as I have been taking this video, it looked like night and day difference because the screen is just so much bigger on the iPhone 16 Pro and the screen is so much nicer that it, just holding them side by side, the difference looks way bigger compared to what it actually is right here now in the timeline. Audio quality again has also been like surprisingly good on the iPhone 5S. Like the difference is not too big. Like obviously if you take a closer look at the colors and stuff, like again, we're not pixel peeping here and we're not like breaking things down and having the most difficult situations here. But just comparing these two shots and these two smartphones and their cameras as a whole, like it has just been a very, very interesting experience. And then lastly, also these cinematic shots, like obviously if you take a closer look at this shot right here, like this looks like even unreal, to be honest. Like I think with the ultra wide angle lens, the iPhone 16 Pro did have the biggest advancement and the biggest, leap forward compared to its predecessor. Like this is just super clear. Like the clarity, I think, and the amount of detail that you're getting is just so much better compared to how it was before. And I think this is also like where you can see a big difference. To be honest, I could still see myself using an iPhone 5S to create like a stylized version of, something similar like this, but it just doesn't look like as crisp and as cinematic as you have it, with these shots here, for example. But like, can you get away with something like this? Like, I think so. A couple of things that you can notice right here is that the shutter is just, it's having some troubles here because it's super bright. I think the new one handles that a lot better. And also when it comes to the internal stabilization or the focusing, or I don't know exactly what's going on in the 5S right here, but it is just jerking around a little bit. Maybe it's also fighting with the gimbal. I don't know exactly what's going on, but that was the most noticeable thing for me personally. But maybe also the new iPhone is just, through its, machine learning and stuff, it's just taking that away. I'm not quite sure about that, but generally speaking, like this is where I could see the biggest difference. But again, if you know like how to use it, like these shots, they are looking very nice. And if you just want to capture like a travel video and capture memories, like this is more than good enough, especially for online distribution. Like if you're gonna bump that up on an 80-inch screen, like obviously you will see a massive difference. And also on YouTube you will see a difference, like don't get me wrong. And with the 16 Pro, like I think these shots, they're just so crispy. Like that's crazy. I really like that. But yeah, even the iPhone 5S does look really cool, and it just has a different style that I personally, to be honest, I really like that. All right, so we have now been shooting for a bunch of hours already, and I just wanted to share a little bit of like what is the real world feeling of shooting with these two smartphones. And there are a bunch of things that stand out pretty clearly. So one thing obviously that you can see is the size, like the lightweightness, the small, the form factor of the iPhone 5S. Obviously it's not state of the art in 2024 anymore, but having such a small smartphone that basically weighs nothing is kind of nice, to be honest. So obviously the screen is pretty bad, especially compared to the brand new 16 Pro. And something that you can also see very clearly is the dynamic range. If you're taking a photo and you have both smartphones next to each other, it is like very clearly visible that the 16 Pro has like tons more dynamic range than the 5S. Also something that you can notice right away is the simplicity, like the iOS that's on the iPhone 5S right here. This is iOS 8, I think, and you just have barely any controls in the camera app. So you can basically just open up the camera app, take a picture, take a video, and that's it. There's not like 100 different things that you can dial in. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? Like, I think you just basically have to decide for yourself what you prefer. But I think for the end-to-end consumer that doesn't care about resolution or any of that kind, just the old one is just a little simpler. Something that's also very noticeable for me personally is just the internal stabilization and the clarity of the footage. Like with the 16 Pro, you basically don't need any kind of gimbal. It always looks more or less rock steady. With that, back then Apple just did not have any kind of image stabilization. If you're shaking, then your videos are also shaky. So yeah, just a few thoughts on actually using the smartphones. But to be honest, I think the 5S is actually holding up pretty nice. All right, so now let's talk about the conclusion, like what's actually the takeaway for us comparing the iPhone 16 Pro to an 11-year-old iPhone 5S. Like obviously coming into this video, each and every one of you knew already that the iPhone 16 Pro is a lot better. And as I have been using the iPhone 5S again for the first time in like, I don't know, 8 years or something like this, it did feel a bit slow and it did feel a bit janky, but there were also some upsides. You know, I have been mentioning that throughout the video, that just the ease of use, the simplicity of not having 100 different settings, like that felt very relaxing, to be honest. Like I could imagine people that are not like super deep into photography and filmmaking, like those people don't want to have a million different options. Obviously, if you are like, you know, a professional and you want to have every little detail figured out, obviously that's nice. But I think for the end-to-end consumer, like not having all of these options is pretty nice. Also, something that has been pretty shocking for me is like, you know, I got the brand new iPhone 16 Pro. I took it out of the box and we started straight shooting. And it has like the camera control button has not been intuitive at all for me. Like obviously starting the camera, that's nice, like with just a button, that's pretty cool. But other than that, like the medium press, the double press, the swiping around, like this has not been intuitive at all. And you know, like you need to consider, like I'm 27 years old, I'm a filmmaker, this is what I'm using on a daily basis. And I could imagine like people that are like, I don't know, 50 years old or so, that are not using that on a day-to-day basis. Like they're probably never ever going to use it because it's not as intuitive as, you know, maybe it has been 11 years ago. When it just comes down to the sheer quality, obviously the brand new iPhone is a lot better compared to how it was before, but even the old iPhone 5S creates some very good photos, especially the pictures have been surprisingly good, and you could easily share them on social media and nobody would notice anything at all. I can guarantee you that. And then obviously there are a few things where, you know, just things have evolved a lot, especially the stabilization, especially the ultra wide angle lens and the clarity. Like obviously these are things that are a lot better, but don't let the type of device that you're using hold you back in any way, shape or form. Like I'm absolutely confident if I just had the iPhone 5S and you would give me like, I don't know, maybe a gimbal or something, I could create a very amazing, you know, travel video or whatever it is. So it's more important that you actually know what you're doing compared to having the latest and greatest gear. In case you would learn more about shooting great videos, we have an entire masterclass, you know, focusing on filmmaking and editing. I will link it down below. It's the first link down below. You can check it out. We currently have some crazy offers going on. And in case you would like to see, you know, a second part of this when we're not just talking about taking photos, taking videos, but also processing that, like what we're actually getting from these iPhones, then make sure to subscribe. We'll cover that very soon. Yeah, thank you so much for watching. Hope you enjoyed it, and I'll talk to you in the next one.